All right, folks, so let's pretend it's the end of class and you hear me say, all right, at this time, if you have borrowed any colored pencils, markers, materials, please return them to the proper place on the side table. Also, if you have any paintings, please make sure that you're bringing your paintings, your paint palettes up to the front of the class. That way we can put those away effectively, right? So at that point, you're gonna be able to gather your materials, get what you need. So let's say I've got my painting right here, right? This is relatively small. And if there's not too many things that are wet on it, you might be able to take, your painting in one hand, paint palette in another. If you're trying to be extra cautious, you might just try to take one at a time. So you might try to take just your painting, make sure that that gets put where it needs to be, come back, grab your paint palette, and then do the same. So in this case, I can comfortably do both and be careful about it. I'm totally fine. So I'm gonna bring this up to the front. I can place my paint palette here on the table next to the projector. There's a space here for that. And then I can take my wet painting, and the way that the drying rack works, if you pull up and out, you'll hear it click, right? You hear that click, and you can slide this down and put your painting there. If you are trying to lift up the drying rack, you lift up and then push in. Again, you hear that click, and that's locked into place. So this is how you use the drying rack and place your stuff there. Occasionally, people will end up putting their paintings up on one of the top shelves and just kind of slide it in between. And what happens is their painting will go and slide down and right out through the back of the drying rack. And then people go, oh, I don't know what happened to my painting, somebody stole it. More than likely, it just slid right down. So try to make sure you're pulling out and dropping it down. That way it's laying flat, and the paint's not gonna run and spill into each other or anything like that. And then we can also spend some time just being able to use our saran wrap. I don't think I have any saran wrap. I'm gonna use wax paper for right now as an example, but we take our saran wrap or our wax paper or whatever it is that we're using, and of course, it's like impossible to rip right now. There we go. Place like this. If I want to make sure that I'm the only one using this paint palette, what I can also do is just take a Sharpie, write my initials on whatever I'm using to wrap up my paint palette, and then people know that that's what I'm using, all right? So obviously we not end up using wax paper. It's not the greatest way to be able to seal in the paint and whatnot, but when you're using saran wrap, you can wrap that around all the edges, making sure that it's airtight, because it makes sure that the paint is not going to dry. In the meantime, you can kind of see the paint's kind of like touching the surface of the wax paper here. It would end up doing the exact same for the saran wrap, and that'll make sure that when you're ready tomorrow, you can come back in, just peel this back, and you have fresh paint to be able to use, right? So once you have your palette finished, wrapped, initials on it, there will be a space up here to be able to put palettes in the paint container. That way you can come back tomorrow, grab what you need, and continue your progress, right? Or any day. We don't necessarily end up painting every single day, but the next available day. All right, so I want you to make sure that you're doing this step before you're going back and washing your brushes, simply because you may be paying attention to what you're doing, but maybe the person next to you or somebody who walks, past your desk may not also pay attention to that. And I want to avoid as many problems or accidents as possible. So we don't want somebody walking through and they don't see that you have paint out, and they go ahead and they put their hand down and make a mess and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to get the paint put away first, trying to get our paintings put away first. That'll make sure that our artwork stays safe. That'll make sure that the paint is put where it needs to be. And then we can go and take our brushes back to the sink, rinse them out, and then lastly, come back to our table, just trying to make sure that there isn't any wet paint or water on our table, and just try to make sure everything is dry. And then lastly, you just take your folder and leave and place, your folder in the bin like we always do. So that's the only difference about our cleanup procedure for when we are painting. Just trying to make sure that everything is clean and dry. And if there are any times that we spill paint, whether it be on the table or whether it be on the floor, we're trying to jump to those things and make sure that we clean them up while the paint is still wet, just to make sure that we're avoiding as many accidents as possible. So please be responsible with the paint that you use. If you are somebody who I consistently see is pouring too much paint, or is, there's too many accidents, or, somebody says, hey, somebody just painted on my sweatshirt or whatever. Sometimes there are accidents like that, but if it continues to happen, it might be one of those situations where you get your painting privileges revoked. And I don't want to do that to a lot of folks because I trust you. I think you can be responsible. But we just have to make sure that we are being careful with the stuff that we're using, because like I've said, it doesn't come out of our clothing most of the time. If it's still super fresh and you just put it on there, sometimes you can kind of rinse it off fast enough if it's a little speck. But if it's a huge amount of paint on your clothing, it's plastic, so it adheres to the fabric, and that's just gonna stay there. So we wanna make sure that we are being as careful as possible. And lastly, if you have an old shirt and you're gonna plan on painting, you wanna bring in a big baggy shirt that you have worn before. If you wanna bring that in, we can keep that here in the classroom. It can be something that you can wear while you are painting. We don't intentionally try to be super messy. But if you just have, you want to keep your clothing nice, you can bring one of those things in and wear that while you're painting only. Not allowing students to just wear whatever shirts they want if they're not painting. But if you're specifically working on a painting project, we can do that. All right. So hopefully you're paying attention. Hopefully you're taking notes, or hopefully you just have a really great memory, because I am going to have a quiz just to see if you were paying attention. And people who are able to pass the quiz will be cleared to be able to paint this week. And then people who fail have to kind of go back and watch these videos over again until they get it right. So hopefully you got a lot out of this, or it reminded you of how to actually paint, because it may have been a while since we've used acrylic paints in our class or clean brushes out effectively. But we're trying to maintain our supplies. That way we can have a nice art room. Thank you so much. And let me know if you have any additional questions about painting, materials, procedures, all that kind of stuff. Thanks and good luck.